Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for our monthly GPU pricing update, a series which has remained remarkably popular despite GPU prices being, well, a bit more normal these days than when we first started. But with new GPU launches, chiefly the Nvidia GeForce RTX 4070 Ti this month, we're still getting a good opportunity to revisit prices, see how those new products are slotting into the market, and take a look at demand. Today's video is sponsored by Gigabyte and their Aorus and Aero RTX 30 series laptops. These excellent machines for gamers and creators are powered by up to an Nvidia GeForce RTX 3080 Ti graphics card and up to Intel Core i9 processors. Gamers will be interested in the Aorus 17X featuring high-performance GeForce RTX graphics, support for DLSS and ray tracing, a super fast 360Hz display, and heaps of cooling power. For creators, check out the Aero 16 with its 4K OLED display, portable form factor, and efficient GeForce RTX GPU. There's plenty of other options in Gigabyte's lineup as well, so learn more via the links below. So let's start with the RTX 4070 Ti, a product that's received quite negative feedback from reviewers and prospective buyers for the most part. This stemmed from the fact that the 4070 Ti has increased in price substantially compared to the RTX 3070 Ti, with the MSRP rising from $600 to $800 US. And while the 4070 Ti is a much faster GPU, in our testing at 4K it only presented an 11% discount over the 3070 Ti in cost per frame at the MSRP, and virtually identical value to the RTX 3070. It is among the better value products from this latest generation, but it's hardly anything to get excited about, certainly relative to the 30 series. Having seen this feedback, it's been no surprise to see that demand for the RTX 4070 Ti has been relatively weak for a new GPU, with no real availability issues. And our understanding is this card, well, it hasn't exactly been shipped in huge quantities. In most regions, the 4070 Ti has been available basically since launch, even at the MSRP, which is in contrast to most good GPU launches where a respectable level of demand typically sees the product sell out instantly and remain hard to find for several weeks. With a poor launch like the 4070 Ti, the demand isn't there to see the card sell out. However, we've also been told the card is a better seller than the RTX 4080, so I guess that's something, although the 4080 has been horrific for sales volumes in general. What's interesting about the 4070 Ti to some degree is that many reviewers got caught up a bit in the rumor mill and predictions that the RTX 4070 Ti would have a fake MSRP. In other words, the $800 advertised price from Nvidia would largely not exist in the market outside a very small batch of units, with most models and ongoing supply being priced more like $850 or $900. This was apparent in some thumbnails and titles, and even in our review, we expressed some skepticism that Nvidia would meet this $800 price point. But it turns out these claims and rumors were false, as Nvidia and their partners have really had no issues supplying 4070 Ti's to customers at the MSRP. Right now you can grab a Gigabyte Eagle model from Newegg for $800 US, and indeed basically at every point we've looked since launch, at least one card has been offered at the MSRP. In Australia there are like 5 MSRP models available right now. Of course, there are a few caveats here. One is that many board partner models are priced above $800. You'll see a lot of options between about $830 and $900 US. But this is relatively common for GPU launches, where you may see a few cards at the MSRP, while AIBs typically target around a 10% premium for their mid to upper end variants. So seeing a bunch of cards at $850 isn't unusual. Having many options above the MSRP doesn't mean the MSRP is fake though. If you do still have the option of buying a card at the MSRP, which is definitely the case here, as I said, you can buy an $800 4070 Ti right now. What makes it a fake MSRP is if there's never any MSRP stock at all, or if the MSRP stock was like 5 units and they all sell out instantly, leaving the vast majority of buyers with no choice but to pay a premium. We saw that many times in the previous generation, but buyers these days are very much less accepting of that practice. The other caveat is that possibly there was still some intention to have a fake MSRP for the 4070 Ti, but sales volumes have been so low that even the initial very low stock of MSRP models hasn't been sold. But given we're now a couple of weeks post-launch and MSRP cards haven't sold out, that seems unlikely. And it's clear that this sort of strategy would have, and possibly has, failed entirely. There is just no way Buyers are going to be handing over $900 for a 4070 Ti in the current market. Even the $800 MSRP is hardly a must-buy. The 4070 Ti not being very attractive at the MSRP will cause many of the $850 plus models to sit on shelves for some time, possibly forever, until they are discounted to a more appropriate level. No different to the RTX 4080 and RX 7900 XT, both of which had poor launches where the exact same thing happened. It is very much a buyer's market right now. Voting with your wallet is working. I've seen the RX 7900 XT already sitting below its $900 MSRP. So if you keep sending the message to GPU manufacturers that pricing is too high, we should see improvements at future launches and possible price reductions for current models. Across the current generation, the only two models that have been a success are the RTX 4090 and RX 7900 XTX, which are largely out of stock across most retailers, especially if you're after one at the MSRP. This leaves third-party sellers as your only choice, offering these models at inflated prices that just aren't worth buying, especially for something like the 7900 XTX, which at $1,300 US right now is poor value, as we discussed in our recent cost per frame video. For the RTX 30 series, it is no longer possible to purchase most of the higher models, as they've now been replaced by the RTX 40 series at price points at and above $800 US. For the 70 series and below, pricing hasn't changed substantially in January compared to December, further confirming that some of these mid-range and mainstream GPUs were given a fake MSRP. In fact, if we look back across almost 12 months of new GPU price tracking, at no point have we found consistent stock available at the MSRP for several of these cards. Maybe a flash sale here or there, but never really on shelves at that price. For example, when we specifically look at the sub $600 market, you'll see the RTX 3070 Ti never coming into the picture at all. That's because its cheapest price was $610 during September and October last year. The RTX 3070 did briefly touch $500 US, but has since gone up in price. The RTX 3060 has yet to hit $330 in our price tracking, and same with the RTX 3050 and its $250 MSRP. Both of these models have been fairly consistent in price now for the last few months. It's only been the RTX 3060 Ti that has been available at or below the MSRP for 2 or more months in our tracking. On the AMD side, with the 6000 series, pricing has fallen by 4% on average this month, which is a small but reasonable drop considering the last few months of price movement. Right now, there appears to be one final push to rid the market of higher-end models. Stock for GPUs such as the 6800 XT is low and can be spotty, same for the 6900 XT where only a single option is available. The 6950 XT has fallen to a new low price point of $700 US, but for other models pricing has been more stagnant. For example, we can see the best time to buy an RX 6800 XT was back in November when they were around $500 US. AMD is doing a much better job of servicing the mid-range and lower parts of the market, with many more options available stretching down to under $200 US. But pricing has been relatively flat since September for many of these cards, so we're very much still at the bottom of the market here aside from the occasional fluctuation. These prices are effectively the new normal for Radeon GPUs, and I wouldn't expect any significant change here until just before new models launch in this price range, which could still be many months away. For further details on which cards are the best to buy in the new market right now, check out our cost per frame update from a few days ago, which has everything you need to know across the US, Europe, and Australian markets. What about used GPU pricing? Well, if you're interested in a 30 series GPU from Nvidia, things are interesting. The top end of the market, including the RTX 3090 Ti and RTX 3080, have fallen in price in response to the launch of the RTX 4070 Ti. It's very difficult to justify buying any 30 series product for above $800 right now, given the 4070 Ti can be had for that price and delivers performance only a touch behind the 3090 Ti. Used 3090 Ti's are actually a bad deal here and should only be considered if you need the extra VRAM, and I don't see much appeal in the 3080 Ti used at a $740 average. It's 8% slower than the 4070 Ti, and it's 8% cheaper used versus a new 4070 Ti, so it makes absolutely no sense right now. I'd expect more price drops in the coming weeks for those cards to more adjust to that 4070 Ti pricing. As for the mid-range and mainstream sections, you're getting between a 20 and 33% discount at the moment, buying used on average, with no substantial price changes except for the RTX 3050. This is pretty similar to previous months. Interestingly, the gap between new AMD GPU pricing and used AMD GPU pricing is less than what we saw for Nvidia. Whereas $600 Nvidia GPUs and lower were on average 24% cheaper buying used, for AMD we're only looking at a 16% discount on average. In fact, right now it's actually more expensive to buy a used 6950 XT on average than just grabbing the cheapest model on Newegg, which is really silly. A few other cards are only available for around a 10% discount, which is, well, it's hardly worth it given the lack of warranty associated with going used. The aggressive nature of AMD's new GPU pricing is causing a few problems here, and it makes it hard to recommend some of these used options. Here's a look at cost per frame for these used GPUs on average using eBay pricing and our 6-game medium settings average from our previous video. I've also thrown in the cost per frame of 3 new GPUs, the RTX 4070 Ti and RX 7900 XT, which are the cheapest current generation models from each brand, and the RX 6700 XT, which is one of the best value new GPUs. As we can see, there is absolutely no point buying a used high-end GPU right now. Pricing is too high on average. You just grab either a new RTX 4070 Ti or a new 7900 XT. There's also a bit of a roadblock in place for mid-range cards when the 6700 XT is available new for $360 US. The used RTX 3070 only matches that new card in cost per frame, while buying a used RTX 3060 is actually worse value than a new 6700 XT. However, it is good to see a clear discount for other models, such as the RTX 3060 Ti and RX 6700 XT when buying used. What's also interesting to observe is that the used market sees AMD versus Nvidia head-to-head performance battles tighten up considerably. The 6700 XT and 3060 Ti are almost neck and neck in value here, and same could be said for the RX 6800, RTX 3070, and the RTX 3070 Ti, which trails a little bit behind. When we looked at new GPU pricing, the 6800 was 24% cheaper than the 3070 in cost per frame, but on the used market it's basically identical, as the 3070 is 33% cheaper than new on average, while the 6800 is only 13% cheaper. However, there are some outliers, such as the RTX 3050 still being a rubbish buy on the used market, and the 6800 XT doing particularly well for its performance. There is also still a tendency for higher-end products to be priced at a premium. It's not a totally flat market where every GPU has a similar cost per frame. The variance is certainly a lot less. Here the RTX 3090 is 73% more per frame than an RX 6600, whereas on the new market it's 130% more, but the premium is still here. As for older GPUs, there's been no substantial change on the used market. The RTX 20 series is priced at or below $400 these days, which makes sense. The 2080 Ti is quite old now and sells for $383 on average, almost the exact same price as the RTX 3070 that goes for $384 used on average. Both GPUs offer similar performance. The GTX 16 series also continues to basically be flat on average compared to last month and prior months, offering decent value for buyers looking at a cheap GPU around $100 to $140 US. Certainly far better options than the atrocious RX 6400 and GTX 1630. Meanwhile, for the Radeon RX 5000 series, again basically flat here. These cards are being offered in large quantities still, especially for the 5700 XT, which is priced at just $170 on average. Back in May of 2021, that GPU was being sold on average for $1,184, which goes to show just how drastically prices have dropped for the best mining GPUs since its collapse in 2022. Overall, there hasn't been a huge deal of change in the GPU market in January compared to December of 2022. The RTX 4070 Ti hasn't shaken up the market in any considerable way, as its launch was, well, I guess I don't want to say a total flop, as it has been selling slowly, but certainly it's been underwhelming, and its relatively high price hasn't put pressure on other GPU models to receive discounts. The high-end market isn't looking great at the moment, and I think a lot of buyers after that premium experience would be very disappointed in the state of things. The RTX 4090 and RX 7900 XTX are hard to come by, other current generation options are poor value, and there are a few other options. The best value high-end GPU these days are things like the Radeon RX 6950 XT, but even that model presents basically a tier below in performance relative to something like the RTX 4080. But the good news is that unlike in 2021, gamers aren't rushing to spend big dollars on a poorly priced graphics card. So the bad practices of GPU manufacturers aren't being rewarded, and eventually they'll be stung into action. I certainly would not recommend buying a mediocre card just because it's the only option. The mid-range and entry-level parts of the market are where the action is at right now. Competition is healthy, AMD cards in particular are great value, and there's a lot of decent buys available in the used market. When looking to grab a used GPU, I'd just caution buyers to make sure you check the new market and ensure you aren't overpaying for a card that's actually worse value used than a brand new GPU. But if you play things right, you can get a good deal, especially if you want something for less than $200 US. Anyway, that's it for this video. That's it for this GPU pricing update for January of 2023. I know you guys are continuing to enjoy this series, so we'll be continuing it probably next month as well. If you are interested in current GPU pricing, we do have links to check that sort of stuff in the description below. And also down there, you'll find our Patreon and Floatplane pages, where if you sign up, you'll get some neat bonuses, like our Discord chat, monthly live streams, behind the scenes videos, and all that sort of thing. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.